Hey everyone, today I'm going to be reviewing the Conqueror mech that I built this week. It took 4 hours to build and it's upwards of 300 pieces. And I think it looks pretty good, but I think I could have made it look a little better if I had more pieces. But I definitely put a lot of time and thought into this build, so I think it turned out pretty good. I didn't actually have the idea to build this mock. Actually, one of my subscribers, ZC23, came up with the idea, and he told me that I should build it. And he gave me a list of qualifications. And the biggest one was just that it has to be able to fit a robot bigger than a minifigure inside. And I actually accomplished that in this build, as you can see in there. I'll take him out later in the build, but he's actually barely bigger than a minifigure, but he technically is bigger, so this robot does make the qualifications. With all of the qualifications being stated, now I'll dive a little deeper into the build and actually give you some of the more intricate details and some of my favorite parts of the build. I'll start with the stomach because that's where the bulk of the detail actually lies. You can see that I used a lot of CCBS for the frame. You can see it through the gaps in the Technics, and it actually worked out very well. I just used a bunch of CCBS joints running up the length of the body. Then I just went back and covered them with Technics, which actually worked out very, very well. He's a very deep build, very wide and deep. It took me a while to get the exact body shaping that I wanted. And he kind of has this big shell. I'll move him a little farther back so you can see the entire shell. It looks pretty good, and it's actually very enclosed. And none of the armor plates fall off easily at all. It actually is kind of surprising. Usually when I cover a surface with armor plates, they're usually very loose. And you can see I did use a few Technics for the frame, but I used mainly CCBS for the frame. Moving him around back to the front, you can see I didn't really use a windscreen piece or anything to keep the actual little figure in place. I just gave him handlebars and he does the rest on his own of just staying in because it's very deep in there. So, and he really can't come out very easily. You can force him out if you want, but he stays in there very well. Now moving on to the arm, you'll see that it has a ton of Technics on it. And both of the arms are exactly the same, so they didn't take me that long to build. If I was building a completely different arm for the other side, it would have taken me a considerable amount of time to build both of them. But I think it wound up only taking me an hour to build both of them, which is actually very good. I've had times where it's taken me 2 or 3 hours to build arms. Arms aren't exactly my favorite thing to build. The body is definitely my favorite thing because it's the easiest. And once I get the body, I feel like it's pretty straightforward from there. As you can see, it connects all the way up there. And you probably also just saw this piece fall off. Comes off pretty easily, which is a major drawback. And unfortunately, it's just right there where I sometimes grab to move the arm and it just pops off very easily. I might try to go back and kind of pin that down later on, but I don't think it's too bad. As long as you don't grab it, it doesn't come off. And I used a ton of bionicle feet. I used a bionicle foot there, a foot there, and a foot right there. Which, I guess 3 isn't a ton, but it's a decent amount for just being an arm and not a leg. I don't usually use feet for arms. And I think it's pretty clever how I used one to connect the whole entire assembly that connects it to the body. I think that turned out pretty good. And moving it around to the front, you'll see that I connected this foot pretty cleverly. I just used this piece, put a clip, and then put it right there, and then put this bar through the shoe, and it keeps the shoe on with the help of this wire that runs through the shoe and connects right there. So this shoe really won't come off, which it took me a second to come up with that design, but I think it looks really good having that shoe sloping downwards. And his forearm looks pretty good too. It uses a lot of actual just Lego pieces right here. I like these little steering wheel pieces. For some reason, I felt the need to put 2 on his arm. And also he uses these very long Bionicle Technic bar pieces. I don't even know what these would be classified as. All I know is it just looks cool. Moving on to the other arm, you'll see it's exactly the same, minus the hand. The hand is obviously different than the gun arm over here. And it looks pretty good. It kind of looks cartoony and like a very old robot. But I think it looks pretty good. I wanted to make a very simple hand that wouldn't take up a ton of pieces, but that would also fit the actual design of the mech. And I think this hand turned out really good. And then the arms are one of my favorite parts of the build because they just look pretty good and kind of blend in well. Moving on to the legs, you'll see that there are 3 legs rather than 2 like on my normal builds. And I think it actually looks fine having 3 legs, but I knew that I'd have to add a 3rd just because the Mach is way too heavy to be supported on 2 kind of small legs like these. I originally thought he would be able to be supported just on these 2, but after putting them on, I knew I had to add a 3rd. And I think it doesn't really look that bad. I think it kind of goes with the theme a little bit. And you can see that the front 2 legs are the same, and this piece comes off a lot. But you can see that the front 2 legs are the same, and the back one is different. But I think it worked out pretty good, because the rigging back here that I used to connect the 3rd leg works also as a brace, so the Mach won't slip back too far. Now, there unfortunately are quite a few loose pieces that kind of come off and shake a lot, so I don't think I'll be using this mech in any stop motions, unfortunately. And these pieces just pop off super easily. I know how to fix it, but I haven't got around to it yet. And it will be easy to fix, though, so that's good. And I think his legs turned out pretty good, and he's very stable. And as you can see, I should probably point this out if you didn't see. He doesn't have any actual feet. I just used the nubs here because since he has 3, he doesn't really need feet. And also, I was running out of feet pieces, or foot pieces. Now I'll take the little guy out to show him to you more close up. Here's the little robot guy that pilots the mech. He turned out pretty good. He meets the qualifications that he has to be a little bit bigger than a minifigure, and I think he turned out pretty good. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a ton of articulation. He has a little bit of arm articulation, and pretty much none in his legs, minus the feet. The feet move a little bit. But luckily enough, he doesn't need articulation to sit in the robot. He's probably like 30, no, probably not even 30, he might be 15 pieces. And that's fine as long as he's just good enough to fit inside the mech.